Good morning or good afternoon. My presentation is about the 400 years of silence. That's the period between the end of Malachi in the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament, the book of Matthew. Now, the first thing we are going to be talking about is understanding the 400 years of silence. And under that, we have different subheadings. The first one is why the silence? Why do we call this the period of silence? The next one will be what actually happened during the silent years. What took place during the 400 years of silence? Three big events took place actually, historically. The three big events, the first one that took place was the kingdom of Persia that was born. The next one is Alexander the Great, who came in under Greece rulership. And the last one was the birth of the Roman Empire. Alright, so we are going to go gradually on our presentation. Now, why the silent years? Why do we say this period was the silent year or silent years? The years between Malachi, like I said, which is the last book of the Old Testament, and Matthew, which is the first book of the New Testament, are called the silent years or the intertestamental period before Christ. So, 400 years elapsed between the end of Malachi and the beginning of Matthew. And what happened? This period is called silent years by historians because the Jewish reckoning, or by the Jewish reckoning, there were no prophets who spoke in the land. There was virtually no word from God for his people. That's why we call them the 400 years of silence. But God spoke in another way. That is why we're going to be talking about what happened during the silent years. It's true that God did not prophesy. There were no prophets. There were no messengers during that period. Maybe God was ushering something for the New Testament. But then something took place. Now, what happened during the silent years? During the 400 years of silence, no prophetic voice was heard. All right? Some historical developments, however, took place. And the first one we have, for example, we said that there are three big events that took place. The first event that took place was the birth of the kingdom of Persia. We all understand that the Jewish people were under captivity, that is the Judah, and then the Israelites in Jerusalem were under captivity by the Assyrian. But the kingdom of Persia was born under the rulership of King Cyrus. So King Cyrus now came in, he came in now with a different style of ruling, a foreign policy that permitted the conquered Jewish people to go home and rebuild the temple, all right, and then rebuild Jerusalem. And this was a remarkable period. Now, the Persian rule ended, or it lasted in 331 BC, 331 BC. Now came in the rulership of Alexander the Great under Greece. He stepped in after defeating the Persians in 33 BC with the introduction of Hellenization, Greek culture, language which dominates the Jewish culture. We understand why the New Testament was written in Greek. The Jewish people now follow the Greek system of education, their philosophy, their language which dominated the Jewish culture. But after the passing away of Alexander the Great, the Roman Empire came in. It sets in after the death of Alexander the Great, like we said. Following the death of Alexander the Great, two sons inherited the kingdom of Greece, but came into serious conflict. And because of that, they solicited help from Rome. And Rome had to settle this conflict by stepping in now, to take over the territory. Rome will now continue to rule over this area, including the Jews, that last until 135 AD. We now understand why the entire New Testament is written in Greek, because the culture, the Greek culture dominated even the Roman Empire. Note that the Greek language was still the dominant language, like I'm trying to say. When we read the New Testament from Matthew to Revelation, all is written during this period of Greek and Roman rule. Conclusion, we have discussed briefly what 400 years of silence means, what happened during this period of silence, And we emphasized on the three big historical events that we have here. We have the Kingdom of Persia that was born, and we have Alexander the Great, and finally the Roman Empire. Thank you very much.